Lego FNAF series. This wasn't just some cheap knockoff. This was a full remake of the original Five Nights at Freddy's, but built entirely in Lego. The attention to detail was insane. They had weekly challenges, a live system, a shop where you could buy plushies and cosmetics. They even made it so you had to own the actual FNAF game on Steam just to play it, basically trying to avoid any copyright issues with Scott. After the first game dropped in June 2022, the response was incredible. The team was so hyped that they announced Lego remakes of FNAF 2 and 3, complete with trailers that are still on YouTube if you want to check them out. But here's where it gets tragic. December 12th, 2022, exactly 6 months after release, the developers got hit with a DMCA takedown. Not from Scott, not from Steel Wool, but from Lego themselves. Just like that, the project was dead. The original game got yanked from Game Jolt, and the sequels were left unfinished. You can still find the first game floating around online, but for FNAF 2 and 3, all we've got are screenshots in those trailers. It's honestly heartbreaking seeing what could have been. Scott Cawthon's Twitter account. Scott actually had a Twitter account way before he became active on social media. The account was just called Real, and it had exactly one post on it. One single post. What was it? A teaser for the Warner Brothers FNAF movie from 2015. Yeah, they were planning a movie 8 years before it actually happened. Wild to think about. The account got suspended in April 2022 for unknown reasons. Some people think it was related to the controversy around Scott's political donations. But that happened almost a year earlier, so who knows? More likely, it just got spam reported and suspended automatically. Thankfully, the Wayback Machine saved everything, so it's not technically lost. But it's crazy that Scott's original Twitter presence just vanished. FNAF AR, this one hits different, because it was official content that just stopped existing. FNAF AR was this augmented reality game where you could encounter animatronics in your real environment using your phone camera. When it launched, people were pretty excited. The concept was cool, the graphics were decent, and it felt like something fresh for the franchise. But then Illumix, the company behind it, started making some questionable choices. Instead of adding the content they'd been promising, they just kept pumping out reskinned animatronics and cosmetics. For 2 years, every update was just recycled content, and maybe some bug fixes if you were lucky. Then in February 2024, they announced the game would shut down. The next day, gone, completely wiped from app stores. Now, there are some archive versions floating around on Game Jolt, so it's not completely lost. But the official version, that's gone forever, taking a chunk of official FNAF history with it. Sister Location version 1.0. This one's pretty minor, but it shows how even small pieces of FNAF history can vanish. When Sister Location launched to the public in October 2016, it was version 1.01. That means version 1.0 existed, but nobody saved it. Scott probably didn't even notice the version change. It was that insignificant. But for completionists and preservationists, it's another piece of the puzzle that's just gone. Running in the 80s. Now this is where things get interesting. Running in the 80s was a fan game released in August 2020, focused on Fredbear's Family Diner. It looked incredible, had solid mechanics, and even got played by big YouTubers like MatPat. There was just one tiny problem. The game was infected with malware, specifically an adware Trojan that would install itself on your computer and spam you with pop-ups while potentially corrupting other files. According to the developers, they had no idea. Apparently, their system was already infected, and it spread to the game files before they published it. The game got pulled from Game Jolt immediately. They tried to re-upload a clean version, but that got taken down too for unknown reasons. There's supposedly a virus-free version floating around somewhere, but finding it is like playing Russian roulette with your computer. Failed Kickstarter. Before FNAF became the phenomenon we know today, Scott tried to crowdfund its development through Kickstarter. The goal was to raise money so he could work on the game full-time without worrying about bills. Here's the crazy part. The Kickstarter was only live for 3 days. Not the planned month, not even 2 weeks, 3 days. Scott created his Kickstarter account in June 2014, launched the campaign, and canceled it on June 17th. Less than 2 months later, FNAF was released and changed everything. One of the rewards for backing the campaign was a wallpaper pack for donating $10 or more. Since the campaign got canceled so quickly, these wallpapers are technically lost media, though honestly, I'm not even sure Scott had time to create them in those 3 days. FNAF World Mobile. In January 2017, Scott released FNAF World on mobile devices. It lasted exactly 1 day before being pulled from app stores without any explanation. But here's the thing. This wasn't just a port of the PC version. The mobile version was completely different, and honestly, it was hilarious. Instead of the normal Fredbear dialogue, he would greet you by saying things like, "Welcome back to FNAF World," World, the game that almost single-handedly destroyed the FNAF franchise. The entire game was basically Scott trolling his own fanbase. The main objective was to use something called the chomp stick to beat enemies, and Fredbear had these absolutely unhinged lines like, "So one time, I mailed myself in a box to my grandmother, looking like this. I jumped out and was like, 'Booyah, rip!'" Scott actually admitted in his announcement that the whole thing was supposed to be a troll. He said people had been begging him to make a mobile port, so he made one as a joke and warned everyone it would be taken down in a few hours. You can still find archived versions online if you know where to look, but the official release, gone after 24 hours. FNAF Plus VHS tapes. FNAF Plus was supposed to be an officially licensed remake of the original game as part of the Fazbear Fanverse initiative. The developer, Phil from Fiznom, created these incredible VHS-style teasers that basically invented FNAF analog horror. These videos were works of art, creepy, atmospheric, and they inspired countless other creators in the community. But in July 2023, everything went wrong. Phil did a live stream where he played through the newly released Ruin DLC, and let's just say he wasn't impressed. His criticisms were harsh, and considering he was part of the Fanverse initiative, people thought it was unprofessional. Things escalated when fans started sending death threats and explicit videos to people who criticized Phil's behavior. Instead of condemning this, Phil made jokes about it and even posted a fake apology that was actually a FNAF rickroll. After the drama exploded, Phil was removed from the Fanverse initiative, FNAF Plus was canceled, and all the VHS tapes were deleted from YouTube. Thankfully, fans re-uploaded them pretty quickly, so they're not technically lost. But the fact that these groundbreaking videos got caught up in internet drama and almost disappeared forever, that's the FNAF community for you. Sparky the dog. Posts everyone knows about Sparky the dog, the fake sixth animatronic that fooled half the FNAF community back in 2014. But what most people don't know is that the original hoax was way more elaborate than just that one photoshopped image. The creator didn't just make a picture, they created an entire mythology. There were posts about how your screen would turn black if you tried to screenshot Sparky, detailed instructions on how to summon him, apparently involving some Call of Duty Zombies level complexity, and descriptions of his game mechanics. All of this started with the very first Sparky post on Tumblr, sometime in August 2014. The problem? That original post, along with all the elaborate setup posts, has completely vanished. No archives, no screenshots, nothing. The creator did a Reddit AMA in 2020, but even they couldn't provide details about the original posts. It's like the birth of the first major FNAF hoax just evaporated from the internet. Bonzi Bunny series, back in 2015. Before he became famous for the joy of creation, Nixon made a series of absolutely unhinged source filmmaker videos called Bonzi Bunny. These were basically shitpost videos featuring Bonnie terrorizing a night guard and saying the most ridiculous stuff imaginable. Think Day Shift at Freddy's Energy, but in video form. The humor was peak 2015 internet, and it's wild to think the same guy who made these goofy videos would later create one of the most terrifying Five Nights at Freddy's fan games ever. When I started researching this, I found that Nixon had actually unlisted the videos rather than deleting them, but the fact that they were hidden shows how creators sometimes want to distance themselves from their early work. Fortunately, there are re-uploads and compilations all over YouTube, so these videos live on as a time capsule of early Five Nights at Freddy's community humor. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 mini-game music, this one's recent and ongoing. YouTuber Bizabizo discovered that 2 songs from Five Nights at Freddy's 3's mini-games, specifically from Mangle's Quest and Chica's Party, were actually stock music that Scott licensed. After months of searching, one song was identified as The Fox Hunter's Gallop by Marion, but the other song from Chica's Party still completely lost. Some sources call it Berry Dance, but the original track remains a mystery. It's fascinating that even now, almost a decade later, we're still discovering and losing pieces of Five Nights at Freddy's musical history. Creepypasta Castle. Want to know what the very first Five Nights at Freddy's fan game was? It wasn't Five Nights at Treasure Island or any of the famous ones you're thinking of. It was Creepypasta Castle, released just 2 months after the original Five Nights at Freddy's. This game was exactly what you'd expect from the first fan game attempt. Broken, buggy, and barely playable. It replaced the animatronics with creepypasta characters like Ben Drowned and Sonic.X, and somehow managed to be impossible to beat even on the first night. The power system counted down into negatives. Each hour lasted 20 seconds, and even if you did absolutely nothing, you'd run out of power by 4 a.m. It was gloriously broken. A full version was released that supposedly fixed these issues, but that version has never been found. The original broken version surfaced in 2024 4, but the complete version remains lost forever. Bird Village, before Five Nights at Freddy's, Scott made animated shorts about birds. Between 1999 and 2002, he created a series called Bird Village, featuring characters named Beak, Seabill, Stork, and Camo going on adventures. For the longest time, we only knew about these because of brief clips included as bonus features on other Scott projects. But in 2020, someone discovered they actually owned one of the original VHS tapes and uploaded 3 episodes to YouTube. In 2024, another tape was found, giving us more episodes. But there's supposedly a sequel called Bird Village Second Nest that's completely lost, and possibly more episodes we don't even know about. It's surreal seeing Scott's creative evolution from anthropomorphic bird adventures to murderous animatronics. Five Nights mystery video. This one's a genuine mystery. In 2014, someone discovered evidence of a deleted video on Scott's YouTube channel called simply Five Nights. This was separate from the official trailer and gameplay videos that are still up. The evidence came from comments on other videos, specifically one person mentioning a previous video with scarier endoskeleton designs. When contacted years later, this person confirmed they remembered seeing an earlier version of the Five Nights at Freddy's trailer with different eyes on the endoskeletons, but then they backtracked, saying they might have been mistaken. The problem is, we know Scott was capable of making multiple versions and updates quickly. He made Five Nights at Freddy's 2 in just 2 months after all. To this day, nobody knows what this Five Nights video contained, or if it was even different from the current trailer. It's one of the most intriguing pieces of early Five Nights at Freddy's history that might be lost forever. The Tearing, Scott wrote a horror novel in 2013, a full year before Five Nights at Freddy's. It was called The Tearing and published under the pseudonym Michael Parsons. What makes this incredibly interesting is the plot. It's about missing and murdered children at an orphanage, with themes that eerily predict the Five Nights at Freddy's storyline. Scott confirmed in 2015 that he had published stories under different names, basically confirming this book exists. But the book itself, completely lost. You can't buy it, you can't find it in libraries. There are no digital copies floating around. It's like it vanished from existence despite being officially published. This represents what might be Scott's first horror work, potentially containing the DNA of ideas that would later become Five Nights at Freddy's, and we can't read it. Update. As of a few months ago, the book has been partially found on some obscure website, but it's still largely inaccessible. 10 Scary Night, the second ever Five Nights at Freddy's fan game, released before most people even knew fan games were possible. This wasn't set in a pizzeria or featuring animatronics. Instead, you monitored your house with a laptop, watching for intruders and closing doors to keep them out. The mechanics were clearly inspired by Five Nights at Freddy's, but the setting was completely different. Your goal was to survive for 2 minutes until the security system alerted police. It was simple, but it was also historically significant as one of the earliest attempts to expand on Scott's formula. The game is completely lost. There's one Let's Play video with under 6,000 views and a single Reddit comment mentioning it. That's literally all the evidence we have that it ever existed. Finding this game would be like discovering a missing link in Five Nights at Freddy's fan game evolution, but the chances of that happening are basically zero. And that's the Five Nights at Freddy's Lost Media. If you've got any leads on these lost pieces, or if you remember something I didn't cover, drop it in the comments. And if you enjoyed, don't forget to subscribe and watch one of the videos on the screen.